I was a sentimental thing. Threw my heart away each spring. Now a spring romance hasn't got a chance. Promise my first dance to enter, but all I've got to show's a splinter for my little flame. This is
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Harmonious World.
like a horse that never left the pole.
My name is Hilary Seabrook, and for this episode I'm joined by singer Cliff Beach from LA.
Staring up at the ceiling, spring can really.
Cliff's latest album is You Showed Me the Way, inspired by the legendary Ella Fitzgerald, with 12 traditional jazz standards and one original composition. I'm really interested to talk to Cliff about this album and hope you enjoy listening in. What you're listening to at the moment is Cliff's version of one of my favourite standards, Spring Can Really Hang You Up the Most.
All afternoon, the birds twit. I know the tune. This is love. This is it. Heard it before, and I know the score.
Thank you for joining me for Harmonious World.
I'm excited.
I'm loving this album.
Oh, thank you.
So it's inspired by Ella Fitzgerald. Is it sort of dedicated to her?
It's dedicated in part to Ella Fitzgerald and in part to my great grandmother, who I remark she says allegedly at 6 years old, growing up in Pittsburgh, she had a schoolgirl crush on Ella Fitzgerald, then husband Ray Brown, and so she would walk by their house and wave to Mr. Brown, and then she would kind of look at Ella, thinking that she stole her man. So it's dedicated to both of them. Um,
That's brilliant because it's called You Showed Me the Way. So, one of them showed you the way, or perhaps both of them did.
Yeah, that's actually the title track, and it comes from a co-written song by Ella when she was very young, just starting out after Apollo with Chick Webb. And so she wrote that in homage to him, showing her the way into jazz. And then I was saying she ushered me into jazz from studying her long career in music as probably, I think, one of the premier vocalists of all time, really.
Yeah. Oh, well, absolutely. Absolutely. We have a radio station here in the UK called Jazz FM, and
Mhm.
she was one of the opening artists of their big launch back in the, 90s or something. So, yeah,
Huge.
she was a huge influence, I think, on a lot of people.
Mm.
So, one of the things I want to talk to you about is, so you're obviously really inspired by, and you really enjoy singing these traditional standard songs. Where did that come from?
Well, definitely with Ella, she had such a long career. So you take her after the Chick Webb years and the war years, really working with Norman Granz and Verve. I think they were some of the foremost in creating songbook series albums. So from the late 50s, early 60s, she did all of these amazing Great American Songbooks. The Cole Porter one, especially the Duke Ellington one, which she did with Duke. And Kern, and there's all these different writers that she kind of focused on. And they would go back and find verses that were then, mostly cut out of the kind of real book standards of jazz, and then bring them back in to really just show that kind of Tin Pan Alley writing style where they were just like people writing in these rooms all the time. And so that kind of got me into to that. And then you just kind of fast forward to now, you look at people like Tony Bennett and Lady Gaga. People have breathed so much life over years into that. Like with Tony Bennett, you see that by the time he released his last record, the second duets album with Lady Gaga, he had done the same song in the longest time span recorded for A Fascinating Rhythm, which was like from the 40s, and then like, 65 years later. And so those songs are timeless. I think they'll be around forever. I think there's always people trying to reinvent them and redo them, and they're meant to be covered and meant to be shared in that way. In my album, there's a cover of Fats Waller's Honeysuckle Rose, which is over 100 years old now, and it sounds still fresh. Even, you look at, certain Christmas songs, like people sing Jingle Bells, and that's 150 years old. So I think the songs, when they're done right, when you really focus on lyrics, when you really focus on melody, they outlive you, and hopefully the next generation brings them back and keeps them alive and carries the torch forward.
Yeah. I'm starting this podcast playing one of my favorite tracks, which I think I love your version. Spring Can Really Hang You Up the Most.
Oh, I'm glad that you like that song. I was telling someone before, doing an album dedicated to Ella, there's a lot of them, but I don't know any male vocalist that ever tackle her songbook. And I didn't know any male vocalist who ever sang that song in particular, Spring Can Really Hang You Up the Most. And I know the story of the background of people who wrote it. There was a woman who wanted to write lyrics, and she worked with a pianist, and I don't even know if they wrote another song after that, but I know that she had kind of pulled it from a T.S. Eliot kind of thing about April being the cruelest month. And so that's where the idea of Spring Can Really Hang You Up the Most comes. But yeah, just I call chromaticisms, the way they do the melody in a certain way, it's so intricate. It's not an easy song to sing, but it's very, it stands out. It's very beautiful.
Yeah,
very
it is.
Pretty.
It is. And actually, at this point in the podcast, I'd really like to play a clip from your version of Round Midnight.
It begins to tell round midnight, and I do pretty well to after sundown. Summertime, I'm feeling sad, but it really gets bad round midnight. Memories always start round midnight. I haven't got the heart to stand those memories when my heart is still with you. Round midnight, come through. When the quarrel we had needs mending, doesn't mean that our love is ending. Darling, I knew lately I'd find you're out of my heart, and I'm out of my mind. Let our hearts take wings round midnight. Let the angels sing for your returning, until our love is safe and sound, and oh, midnight comes around.
That's a great version as well.
Oh, well, I was very inspired. There's an artist, I think it's pretty well known. She just started, I think, won a Grammy in the last year or two, named Lettucey.
Yeah.
And she did a version very early on in her career that only lives on YouTube. It's not out on all streaming services. Really demos, I guess. And she was great. And actually, she was one of the people that really got me into Ella again in like the mid 2010s. They did a PBS tribute to Ella, and that was the first time I heard Lettucey, and she covers Blues in the Night. And her version was just so electric. I just was like, who is this person? I need to know everything about them. And that's how I found these old demos. And so I wanted to redo it because I was like, wow, just she's impeccable in how she sings and her voice is so beautiful. And so yeah, I've always loved Thelonious Monk, and I've always thought that was an interesting song and melody, and his writing style is very kind of cerebral in a way. And I again, it's one of those songs I don't think it's necessarily the easiest song melodically to do, but it really fits a thing. Like when you think about around midnight, it sounds like it's pulled from the ether around that time, like this twilight bewitching thing happening with it. And I loved Ella's version, and I listened to that many times. And I was very inspired just to try to tackle it. But the whole album really, since I came from funk and soul and R&B and had a lot of success there, I really wanted that to be a part of the record and a part of these songs to show that they can stretch like taffy and be different. And of course, there are some purists and people who are like, well, it's not really like the traditional we know. But then there's other people who are like, wow, this is so refreshing because it's like nothing else we've heard. So that's really like the people that I've been trying to go after are people who are like, I mean, people who love jazz, they also love Motown and they also love James Brown. And why can't we have them all together?
Yeah,
Why can't Stevie Wonder and Ella Fitzgerald have this baby? And I try to
yeah.
bring that to the forefront. So yeah, I love Around Midnight. That's my mom's favorite song. She executive produced on the record as well. And so she loves that version of Around Midnight, so she plays it a lot.
It's a great version of a lovely, a lovely track. And I really like your cheeky bit of Van Morrison in the middle with Moon Dance. That's a great
Yes.
little clip.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's a huge Ella thing too. So if you watch the documentary with Ella called Just One of Those Things, came out a couple of years ago, they show the parallels of what they call quotations. So in an Ella live setting, there were times where they're like, she actually pushed like 40 different quotations of songs in that because she just had such a huge kind of pop repertoire.
Yeah.
You'll hear her in the 50s doing Harry Belafonte and some of her jazz, or later 60s stuff. You'll hear her do the James Brown sound or the Beatles or other stuff. So I think that's cool that it keeps it interesting. And I like to do mashups. I like to force things kind of like in there because you wouldn't immediately be thinking that, but then I think when you hear, you're like, wow, that worked, but nobody else would be necessarily thinking like, oh, but to me, it's like, well, that Van Morrison song is jazz to me, even though
Yeah.
it's not exactly jazz, but I was like, it's very jazzy and how he does it. And I've always liked him, and I love his later kind of actual jazz records with jazz organist that he did. And so yeah, I just like that because it's like an Easter egg. It's like you find this little gem that you weren't expecting, and then now you're thinking, it's like the listener now can think about something different that
Yeah.
they wouldn't have thought about otherwise. And it's very unique to me because that was just the way I heard it, which is not the way someone else would hear.
Yeah.
So that's fun for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great. So talk to me about the one track on here that is yours.
Oh, The Gift of the Blues.
I
It's funny
love
because
that.
The Gift of the Blues is a title that was done by one of my favorite country artists, Loretta Lynn, for her Christmas album. Um, and I had written the song a few years ago. So backstory, when I was figuring out I want to make a jazz record, I went to Berklee College of Music in Boston over 20 years ago, and I learned a lot of jazz there. And I've always loved jazz, but I never really wanted to tackle it because I thought it was, and rightfully so, I thought it was too hard. And so when I was trying to figure out, okay, I want to have an arranger come and arrange this music with me, I asked a friend, my friend Julia, who is a Berklee person from Poland, and she does her own music. She's worked with Boney James and a bunch of other artists, and then she writes a lot for movies and film scores and stuff like that. So she was like, I just had a baby, I'm too busy, but my assistant, another Berklee person from Japan, can do it. His name is Moon, and so we started working together. And he's young but very hungry and very eager, and so we worked months painstakingly on all the arrangements, and everyone said, you use a lot of ink because it's very through composed like classical music. Like we everything is written out note to note, start to finish. And so, anyway, through that process is how I decided years ago, I had written a song for Julia, and this song, The Gift of the Blues, she was working with an artist who needed a song, so I wrote it, and then they ended up not using it. So it sat in what I call hard drive records. It just lived on my computer for
Yeah.
like a decade. And then finally, when this album came out, I was like, I always, because I did a Christmas album a few years ago, if I'm doing covers, I always like to have at least one original song just that I can show people. I write two, and I also believe we should be contributing to the American Songbook so that it's living and getting new songs. Um, because there's some things that only you can do. Like only you can write that song if it's your song. And if you don't, and if you don't record it and get it out there where people can hear it, then it doesn't have the chance of, another Cliff Beats 20 years from now making a cover of that, So it's like you got to put it out into the ether, into the zeitgeist. And so I wanted to make sure that we showcased it. So we put it at the end. And it felt, even though it wasn't an Ella song, it was very like influenced by her. And it has some shades of Ray Charles and some shades of Big Mabel and other vocalists that I like, and energy that I like. But to me, it has a little bit. If you think of Ella's live version of Old Man Mose and Louis Armstrong, it's got a little bit of flair in there too.
Yeah, definitely. It's a great track. I love the lyrics of it. Yeah,
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 yeah. It was fun to write it because lyrically, I was always I feel that all the lessons that you learn are gifts, and I think we learn a lot from uh, pain as a teacher, and so that's what I'm trying to get across. And I also love the feeling of blues because blues is very cathartic, and it really stems as really a predecessor into jazz, but more um it's like blues can be happy, blues can be sad. It really kind of has, it can be melancholy, it can do all those things. And so I like that as like a paintbrush and a color because everyone's blues is a little bit different. And you can listen to blues to get out of your blues, ironically, because you're sharing even a sad moment, sharing the experience together. We say here that like if you share like something painful, then it splits the burden in half so we can carry it together. And then if you're sharing joy, then it amplifies and doubles that. And so that's what I was trying to do with the gift of the blues.
yeah. Fantastic. That's brilliant. So, when was the album recorded?
Oh, okay. So the album came out in March. It was recorded a year before that, I think. And we did it in true jazz fashion where we cut it. They don't really say, hey, we did it on these 2 dates. So we just did 2 dates, rhythm section. I know I took more times overdubbing because I wanted to make sure my vocals were going to be exact. And we added some, I guess, non-traditional backgrounds, and sprinkled in. I didn't want to have too many of them, but I'm I'm an 80s baby, and so I grew up on Thriller, and I love those layered Michael Jackson vocals, so I like to try to get that in there.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
also, Quincy came from jazz and studied at Berkeley, and so he had this. Well, he has two things. One is that you always want to have hooks within hooks within hooks. So the guitar has a hook, the drum has a hook, the bass has a hook. That's why those songs are so iconic. You hear just like a little bit of this or a little bit of that, you
yeah,
know exactly what it is.
yeah.
And then his famous line that everybody says, I see Jamie Foxx and other people impersonate him. He says, "You can't polish doo doo." So it's like you have to put a good input to have a good output. So we
Yeah,
really focused on the pre-production, bringing the right players together, rehearsing, and then by the time we got to those actual 2 dates to cut most of the record, it went pretty smoothly, pretty swimmingly. But yeah, I had a lot of fun working with new blood, a new rhythm section. For me, it was great because we had all these people who came from kind of musical theater and jazz, where they were really adept at reading. Because again, because we wrote everything out, I had to get people who were really heavy sight readers, and I am actually not a great sight reader, so I'm the anomaly. So it's like I had all this ink, and I'm like, I'm gonna end up just looking at this as like a guidepost, but then doing my own thing, which I felt was also very Ella. So
Yeah.
It's funny because it's like when you put teams together, people always think like, oh, you're the leader, so you'll be the strongest one. It's like actually sometimes I put myself as the weakest link because it stretches me, and I feel that all growth happens like outside of your comfort zone. So like it forces me to be better. I went to do a cold plunge, unrelated, recently, where you get in an ice bath for 2 minutes, and it was my first time, and I did it, and people were like, well, how did you do that? I was like, well, they chose me as like a guinea pig to film that day. And I was like, when eyes are on me, it forces me to finish. And
Right.
so that's how the record was. I was like, if I have all these good people around me in the session, then I have to be good. It forces me to focus and to laser beam because I have to, because people
Yeah.
eyes are on me. So
Yeah, fantastic. Oh, well, that's brilliant. Well, I wish you all the best with taking the album out and playing it to people because it needs to be people need to hear it.
oh yeah, I mean we're doing great right now. PR, lots of outlets are picking it up, radio's picking it up, more streaming is picking it up. Hopefully, Moon right now is in Japan, so hopefully when he comes back to Los Angeles, we'll start actually playing some of the record out towards the summertime here, which would be great for festival series
Yeah.
and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm excited. I mean, I think everybody, no matter what you do, whether it's podcasting or writing books or whatever it is, art, you just need to get it out. Just get it out there because you just have no idea where it can take you, where it can go. And it's like little seeds. You plant them and then they spring up and then fruit spring from that and other ideas happen. So it's like now we're already thinking of like, what's the next cool thing that we want to do? What's the next artist we can shine a light on and tackle. And so that's
Yeah.
exciting because there's all these times where I feel afraid and I have to do it anyway. People think like, oh, you get on stage and you never have stage fright, you're never afraid of anything. I was like, that's not true. Like making a jazz record when you're like, I don't know exactly how to do it. But I just do that. I just put it on paper and say, hey, I want to make this record. Here's some songs I want to do. Who do I need to get? And it's like a Wizard of Oz, I pick up my Tin Man and my Scarecrow as I'm walking down this road. And then you realize I've had the slippers on the whole time. It was inside me. I could go home anytime.
There you go. Fantastic. Well, thank you, Cliff. It was really, really nice to talk to you.
So nice to talk to you, and I hope we talk again in the future. Best of luck to you and everything.
I'm over you and I'm over us. I'm done with you and I'm done with love. It is a game I always lose. Leaves me the gift of the blues. Just a dog.
Thank you for joining me for that episode of Harmonious World. And what you're listening to now is The Gift of the Blues, the last track on Cliff Beach's album, You Showed Me the Way. And this is his almost dedication to Ella, actually. I hope you enjoyed listening to my conversation with Cliff Beach and have a very, very good week.
It helped me get over you. Been a war, got by the scars, piecing together my shattered heart. Love was a foolish thing to do that left me the gift of the blues. Blues is for the lonesome, melancholy, broken-hearted too. When I'm overcome with such emotion, it helps me get over you. Been a boy, got battle scars, piecing together my shattered heart. Love was a foolish thing to do. Give you the gift of the blues. Love was a foolish thing to do. Let me the gift of the blues.
Thank you for listening to the latest episode of Harmonious World. My name is Hilary Seabrook, and it's a great delight to bring this series of discussions with musicians and composers and writers and all sorts of people to you. Obviously, there's no point in having a podcast if people aren't listening, and I'm very grateful to my listeners for doing so. Thanks also to Joe English for composing and performing this new theme tune. So wherever you get your podcast, you can leave a review. You can share this with your friends and family, either as a link or on social media and that sort of thing. I'd be really grateful for that. Don't forget that you can subscribe now. There's a link wherever you get your podcasts. So have a great week, and please remember why I started this, which is just to try and make the world a little more harmonious. Thanks for listening to Harmonious World.